You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hey, all you music lovers out there, welcome to Modern Musicology. Say hello to the international man of mystery, Anthony Williams.
Hello.
DJ and journalist, Rob Levy.
Hey.
Drummer, singer, songwriter, Stephanie Seymour.
Hello, people.
And I am R. Alan Seiler. And this year, what the fuck? So this week we are talking about the year 1975. You know, we're in 2025 now, and every year we do a series of these anniversary shows talking about albums from 50, 40, 30, whatever years ago. And so it's time to talk about 1975, which was a really interesting year as far as new genres coming in, and a lot of bands that we think of as classic bands hit sort of a peak this year, like classic things get released this year. So Anthony, give us a little overview of what 1975 was like.
Yeah, so we had some pretty big events happening in 75 in more general history. So we start the year off on January the 1st, where 3 men are found guilty of being involved in the Watergate cover-up. So that's our starting event. So
Great.
Something big right out of the gates. In February, Margaret Thatcher becomes leader of the British Conservative Party. And of course, she will go on to become prime minister just 4 years later. In April, we have Bill Gates and Paul Allen founding Microsoft. And at the end of the month, the Vietnam War finally comes to an end with the fall of Saigon. In June, a state of emergency is declared in India, which is subsequently approved by their parliament in July. And then in October and November, the Spanish government undergoes its transition from a fascist dictatorship under Generalissimo Francisco Franco, who is still dead, by the way.
Thank you.
Or not yet dead. I forget what it was on SNL. But it moves into a constitutional monarchy under King Juan Carlos I. And of course, it's still a constitutional monarchy today. And then my personal favorite event of 1975 is in November. The third Cod War between the UK and Iceland begins. And
Cod
yes,
War?
this is
Wow.
literally a conflict over fish,
Nice.
which is amazing.
Is that something that's taught in history classes in England?
Absolutely not. I saw it, thought it was fucking hilarious, and decided it needed to be included.
Cod Wars, man, that's a good album title.
It's not just the Cod War. It's the third Cod
The
War.
third, yeah.
There'd be
Exactly.
3 of these fucking things.
It could be a trilogy.
It could be, or it could be the third of 16 Cod Wars. Who knows?
It could.
Cod is serious.
You know what?
business in that
Screw
part
it.
of the
We're going to
world.
talk about fish in this podcast.
I mean, you know, cod is the fish used in fish and chips in the UK. So
Yes.
we're talking serious business here.
It is. Yeah.
Do you think the third was the last, though?
You
Damn
think England won it?
I mean,
I know who lost the cod.
you know, I haven't studied it in history, but I do know there were various incidents of boats ramming each other.
How interesting.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
bonkers.
Like the Vikings
I'm
or
so
some
intrigued
shit.
by this now. Well, in other parts of 1975, some of the big movies that year, the big one, of course, speaking of cod, the big one was Jaws.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
Yeah.
pardon the pun, but a monster movie. I remember it so well.
Yeah.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and there was a couple of other like musical ones, which are Shampoo and The Who's Tommy came out that year and was actually the 10th biggest producer in the box offices that year. On television, the big thing happening was All in the Family, which is still one of my favorite television shows I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Some of the other big hits, and that was a Norman Lear show, and he just had a huge year in 75 where he had all these shows that were doing really well with Maude, the Jeffersons, and some other ones. And then, some other things like MASH was doing really well, and the Waltons, and Happy Days was happening. So that's some of what was happening on television that year. And Anthony, I know you've got some things to talk about in the music world specifically, so let's hear it.
Yeah, so just some key events. Of course, in March, we had the 17th Annual Grammy Awards, which were in New York, hosted by the one and only Andy Williams. Stevie Wonder's Fulfillingness's first finale wins Album of the Year. Olivia Newton-John's I Honestly Love You wins Record of the Year. And Barbara Streisand's The Way We Were wins Song of the Year. And Marvin Hamslick wins Best New Artist. Moving on in the year, in April, Ritchie Blackmore plays his last show with Deep Purple before quitting to found Rainbow. In August, speaking of people leaving bands, Peter Gabriel leaves Genesis, making the rest of us have to listen on with Phil Collins.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
In October, John Lennon wins his battle to stay in the US after the New York Court of Appeals overturns the 1972 deportation order against him. And then a couple of firsts. In November, the Sex Pistols play their very first concert at the St. Martin's School of Art in London. So we're starting to get punk emerging. And then lastly, on Christmas Day, December the 25th, bassist Steve Harris forms the very first iteration of Iron Maiden.
Yes.
Who 4 years later would finally put out their debut EP, The Soundhouse Tapes.
It's so funny to think of Iron Maiden happening that early, like that's its origin, goes back that far, because it's, other than, Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, there's not really that much happening that would lead you to think of something like Iron Maiden.
Priest had dropped Rock-a-Roller in 74.
True.
Sad Wings of Destiny would come out in 76. So you were starting to see the metal scene emerge, but it was still very early days.
Yeah. Man, that's so interesting. All right. So do you want to talk about where you all were in 1975? Because for me, I think I was like 12 at this point, and I really started I started breaking away from the music that I heard with my parents, which in car rides to my grandparents' house was like country music and gospel. And I was really starting to pay attention to like top 40 and stuff that kids were listening to at school around 73, 74. But my earliest really distinct and specific musical memories happen in 1975. So this is really the year that I start to really kind of tune in to what's happening musically and really start to absorb it. So many of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, I have such specific memories about. What about the rest of you? Anthony, where were you in 75?
I was minus 12 years old. I was born in 1987, so I did not exist yet. I was not even a gleam in my father's eye.
No, you were not. No.
In fact, I think my mother would have been 17.
Oh, wow.
All right. Damn. For us oldsters. I was 9. So, and kind of like you, Alan, I was really still mostly actually listening to what my parents listened to. So there was a lot of Beatles. There was, there was a lot of kind of soft rock kind of stuff that they liked. But then I was also getting into stuff that I really loved. Like the year before, the first album that I ever bought was Elton John's Greatest Hits. And I will be talking about Captain Fantastic, which is the second album I ever bought. So this is like the year I really started sort of discovering music that I really loved.
Let's see. I was 7, so I was still hearing, stuff, the old jazz stuff my dad was playing. But at that point, the two big influences that are sort of coming at me, my brother's got his deep R&B stuff, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. He's got, Earth, Wind and Fire and the OJs. And then the sort of very beginning of disco stuff, like, I had no idea at the time what any of it meant, but sort of like the beginning of the like sort of big gay disco anthems. So he had Tavares, he had Never Can Say Goodbye, that kind of stuff. So that's one angle of it. My angle of it is the first 45 single I ever bought was in 1975, and it was Rhythm Heritage's theme from SWAT, which was a television show.
Yes.
The original SWAT TV show. And this thing was everywhere. It was funky. And I'll still throw it in sets now here and there. But that's the first 45 that I bought. And then conversely, my sisters this is sort of 75 is kind of the golden year for what we would call AM radio, sort of like soft rock, because you've got the Captain and Tennille, you've got Rhinestone Cowboy, you've got Stand By Your Man, you've got Mandy by Barry. You got like 5 Barry Manilow singles, right? So and the way my sisters were playing like all that crap. So that probably is what made me run into being a little new wave, punk kid.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the influences that I kind of had at that particular time. It is also the first time I ever remember hearing ABBA, though, because my brother was playing SOS all the time.
Oh yeah.
So the two records I remember hearing for the very first time as a small little bastard were SOS by ABBA, and then and I didn't know what an SOS was. What's SOS? What's this? My dad's like, well, I had no idea, right? Yeah, so that and Rhythm Heritage record, and then I did get in trouble for listening to Love You Baby with my brother, and my dad pulled me out of the room. And I didn't really figure out what was going on with that till I was like maybe 16. Oh,
yeah, that was a big single. I think that's really where disco starts to become mainstream. Like that's where it really starts to become a commercial entity. And that single, the song itself is like the whole album side. The first, like side one of that record is that song. And then they just sort of slice out 4 minutes of it to release as a single. It's hardcore. Yeah.
I do want to talk, one of the albums I have in mind to talk about, since I mentioned in the history Blackmore leaving Deep Purple and founding Rainbow, he very quickly got an album out. I mean, he left Purple in, April. And by September, the first Rainbow album was released. He had recorded it in February and March 75, so before he'd even left Purple.
Oh, wow.
So this was being planned for a while, which is a little bit wild to me. But it's a great album. Probably not the best of the Dio era Rainbow albums, but it's a very strong start. Coming in with Man on the Silver Mountain, Catch the Rainbow is such a beautiful ballad. Temple of the King is another strong one. As I said, not quite their strongest album, but still a very strong introduction.
And what's interesting about that is that so Ronnie was in a band prior to that called Elf, and they released their last album in June, which means he was, I don't know when that album was recorded, Trying to Burn the Sun, but he was clearly recording with Blackmore before that final Elf album even came out. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they were both kind of moonlighting, knowing that they were, going on to do other things, but fulfilling commitments with their existing bands. I think Trying to Burn the Sun was recorded in January and February 75, so there may have been some crossover with Rainbow. But the other interesting thing is the bands that recorded Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, the first Rainbow album, was more or less the Elf lineup.
Yes.
You had Gruber, you had Gary Driscoll, you have Mickey Lee Soul, and of course you have Ronnie James Dio. And the big thing is Steve Edwards is out and replaced with the one and only Ritchie Blackmore.
Yeah. And Anthony, you know what this calls for?
What's
Shot? That? I don't know.
No. I don't think we've done anything yet to trigger our drinking game. No. I think that you and I have to watch that Dio documentary again.
Ooh, I'm always down for that Dio documentary.
Oh my gosh,
That's fantastic.
Was so good.
I want to talk about, because Alan, you were mentioning about this is a year when some people really hit their peak game, and I feel I have 2 albums by the same artist that both came out in this year, which is Elton John's Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, and then Rock of the Westies. So in May, he releases his 9th album, which is Captain Fantastic, which just have to say, I think this album influenced me musically like more than I ever realized until later in my life. You know, it's because this is an album that's just like ingrained in my head. And this album was certified gold before it was even released. And then it reached number one in the first week of release on the Billboard 200. First album to achieve both of those honors. Sold 1.4 million copies within the first 4 days. Again, I mean, it was just massive. And this was actually the last album that included the original lineup of his band, which is, you know, Davey Johnston, Dee Murray, and Nigel Olsson. And I think that the quote from the producer, Gus Dudgeon, was just like perfectly summing this album up, which is, there's not one song on it that's less than incredible. And interestingly enough, I found out while I was researching this, Someone Saved My Life Tonight was actually the only single released from this album, which I thought was strange because I know every song like the back of my hand. So to me, it's like, oh, everything is a single, like, you know, but anyway. And that was also like an over 6-minute song. So I don't think that could probably be released as a single today, you know?
Oh, that would never happen.
Never. No.
I mean, except for like by some band who like releases it digitally, but anything that hopes to get radio play, no.
And that's just a genius of a song. But
it's so good.
Then you go to October and boom, here's Rock of the Westies, which actually had the same kind of repeated thing of entering the Billboard chart at number one, which is, again, bananas. This had great songs on it. Island Girl, Grow Some Funk of Your Own, I Feel Like a Bullet in the Gun of Robert Ford, Dan Dare. And that opening medley with like Yell Help, Wednesday Night, and Ugly. Oh my God, it's just so good. So, he was, talk about just like on a huge, massive roll. He was.
And then also, perhaps one of the most underappreciated works of art of the 20th century, in Van McCoy's The Hustle came out. It's later used in every public service announcement ever recorded, which is why it's so important, because literally every late night local access TV show used The Hustle as a music bed for something. It was like the best music bed record ever. But I remember too not being able to escape The Hustle. And Steph, getting back to your thing, that is sort of the first doorway I had to Elton John, because my brother was playing that.
Captain Fantastic or both?
Captain
Fantastic. Yeah.
He may well have played the other one, and I just thought it was all. And I don't really remember all of hearing it or when I first heard it. I just remember it sort of like always being around. You know, if my brother or my sisters had people over at the house, I remember them having Elton John records or talking about Elton John and stuff. So.
And it's so funny when you think about the singles that were coming out that year, because Someone Saved My Life Tonight, as you said, the only single from that album, follow that up with Island Girl, because that is two very different songs.
Totally.
Like nothing alike.
Exactly.
Kiss would never still be around if it weren't for 1975, because near the beginning of the year, they put out their third album, Dressed to Kill, which, you know, their first three albums did not do. I mean, nobody gave a shit about them. They didn't make an impact at all. But Dressed to Kill had this little song on it called Rock and Roll All Night, which, again, didn't really do anything until later in the year when their manager was like, okay, studio albums are not doing it for us, but where you guys are really killing it is your live show. So we need to record a live album and put that thing out. And in September, Kiss Alive came out, their first live album, and the live version of Rock and Roll All Night was released as a single, and it was a monster.
Yeah.
So if it weren't for 1975, Kiss would not have a career, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. That I'm not even a huge Kiss fan, and like that was everywhere. That song, that was just everywhere.
Yeah, and it's such a good. First of all, the arrangement is different than the original recording, because the original recording didn't have a guitar solo, and it didn't. You know, there was just changes that made it a better song on the live version, and there's just such an energy to it.
Yeah,
I mean, it was the perfect release to actually break Kiss into some kind of success.
Yeah, we had a kid in the neighborhood lived right across the street named Mike Boner, and that dude, I think, played nothing but Kiss records that entire year. And I'm like, what is this? And my dad's like, never you mind. And I'm like, okay.
Never you mind.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. Well, I think my parents were really worried about the music I was exposed to in 1975 because I was asking lots of questions. I remember asking about the makeup. I remember asking my sister about, Peter Criss and the makeup. I said, who's the cat guy? And she's like, oh, that's Peter Criss. I'm like, oh, okay.
You're absolutely right, because I was basically raised in a church family, and I think there was a lot of concern about the stuff that I was starting to listen to also. And I think there was some concern about my, very early but growing interest in Kiss. And within 3 or so years, it had become so acceptable that I don't remember which year it was. It may have been 78. I think it was 78. Like, all the Christmas presents I got that year were Kiss posters and records and action figures. And I was like, well, it wasn't fun anymore because it had become sort of accepted, and it wasn't like a rebellious thing. So I kind of like moved on to other things at that point.
Probably like every other kid also went for a Halloween costume as like one of the Kiss guys.
Right. That's true.
I mean, you guys were saying that the beginning of disco you were thinking is really Love to Love You Baby. And maybe that's true, but I had on my list Casey and the Sunshine Band's first record because
that's one of them too. And you've got that, you got Jive. You've also got Jive Talking by the Bee Gees. You've got a lot of stuff going on, right?
So,
I mean,
because this one had Boogie Shoes, right? That's the way I like it, which you could not escape either. Both were number one.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, though, Boogie Shoes became a really big hit in 78 because that's when it was on the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. But still, I mean.
But, in soul, in funk, there's also a lot of going on. And this is a huge year for George Clinton because he has 3 big albums that come out that year. And April, Parliament puts out a record called Chocolate City. April, later the same month, Funkadelic comes out with Let's Take It to the Stage. But then December hits and Parliament puts out Mothership Connection, which is one of the all-time great funk albums. And so George is just
he's on
everywhere
fire too.
That year.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Funk is coming into what's going to be disco. Funk is definitely in soul, you're hearing in Earth, Wind, and Fire, and you're hearing in even the drumming in stuff like Never Can Say Goodbye. It really hitting soul with Harold Melvin. So yes, I mean, funk is literally everywhere, and it's outside of what Kiss is doing. I think funk and Kiss are the bands that are making the look of 1975. That could just be me, but that's kind of, I have a very fond memories of going to the grocery store and I'm like kind of like going, what is that? And now I understand that it's people that are into funk, but a very distinctive sort of dress and stuff to it.
And mentioning that, I do want to talk a little bit about Deep Purple's Come Taste the Band, because that's their first post-Blackmore album, and they brought in Tommy Bolin and Glenn Hughes, who'd already been in the band for 2 albums, but those 2 effectively started to run the show. And so rather than just the hard rock edge that Purple had previously, they're bringing in those elements of blues, funk, and soul. And if you listen to that album and you take a track like Getting Tighter, there's a lot of funk in that track. This time around has a huge amount of soul in it. It's a really cool album. And it really is kind of riding that wave with those 2 really jumping in and doing maybe not all of the writing, but they're certainly influencing the direction of the band.
It's interesting that Rainbow is almost the continuation of the traditional Deep Purple sound.
Yeah.
And without Richie's influence, the band is almost free to do other things. I mean, they've always done other things, but.
And I think, particularly Tommy Bolin coming in as this kind of weird hippie kid who's down for a little bit of whatever and forming such a tight bond with Glenn Hughes, who describes himself more as a funk and soul artist than as a rock artist. It really did just change the direction of that band.
Yeah.
And, what you then see over the year, right, into the end of 1976 was the complete destruction of the band because of the addictions that Tommy Bolin and Glenn Hughes had that led to their breakup in July 76, and ultimately Bolin dying of a heroin overdose at the end of 76.
Oh my God. That's short-lived. I mean, that's just like...
Yeah, there's a whole documentary about that final tour where David Coverdale, and sorry, I'm getting into 76 here because
That's
it's
okay.
too interesting. But Coverdale apparently went into John Lord and Ian Pace's dressing room in tears at the end of the last show, declaring that he quit. And those two just said, yeah, there's not actually a band left for you to quit. Like a whole thing just disintegrated over that final tour as they kind of steadily just saw what addiction was doing to the band and how upset everyone was getting.
You know, on another topic, and this leads to one of the albums that we're going to talk about, is that I don't know how in the hell David Bowie survived 1976.
Yeah.
I guess that's a cue for me to jump into Young Americans.
There you go.
Which I was a little worried about taking because I thought it'd be on Alan's list, so we can tag team this one. So a couple interesting things about Young Americans, right? You have a very young, unheard of Luther Vandross on it. It's the first record with Alomar. And while he's recording this, I mean, you've got the fingerprints of John Lennon on this record. And then Bruce Springsteen came down from New Jersey to Philadelphia. Like, what's he doing? What's he making? So Springsteen's hanging out, you know, in the studio while Bowie's making Young Americans. And he talks about it. And it was just like, it was very freeing for him as an artist to just see someone that young, just know what he wanted to do and just completely just didn't care what anybody thought. So having said that, Young Americans is really great. I mean, it's one of the best opening tracks on a record. And the whole album itself is also pretty fantastic. The other neat thing about it is that Bowie does a complete career, 360, which is not the first time he's done it, but he's really just completely abandoning everything he's known for and embracing soul music. And people are just like, what the hell is this? I mean, it literally would be, if Stephanie suddenly walked out of here and said, I'm making a Calypso record, right? It was just sort of like that big of a turn, right? It's pretty incredible. But I think the record too also has sort of this fresh sound to it. Even though it's a soul record, you could play that now around literally anyone you knew and they would love it. I'm also a big fan of Somebody Up There Loves You, which is also a movie, I think. So yeah, really solid 1-2 punch. You've got Fame. Speaking of the influence of funk, there's a lot of funk on Fame.
And that was his first #1 hit in America.
Yeah, and this record, I think, wasn't this his first big commercial American record too? Kind of,
probably just because of the radio success he had with the single.
It's really held up. It's a record that, if you want to explain David Bowie to anybody who doesn't necessarily listen to rock music, you can play this. The production's on it's great. Alomar, man, and I would not realize this until much later, but Alomar's playing on this thing is just amazing. And then you've got Eva Cherry. I mean, when you look at the people he got on this thing, you got Eva Cherry to be on it too, which is great. Bowie sort of taking glam, funk, and soul and putting it on a rock record is pretty much what it is. If it's one sound, there's 2 records that year that I think sort of take this, like taking a bunch of stuff and putting them into one place that are sort of like rock legends sort of records. And I think this is the Bowie one.
Okay. Can I make a confession?
Yes. It's your least favorite.
Yes.
I'm not a fan either, Alan.
I mean,
it's fine. I like it, but
I like it, but it's not my favorite. Yeah.
I mean, it's not my 25th favorite either. Well, 24th since he did 25 solo albums.
Wow.
I will say that I have learned to appreciate it more through time.
I have tried.
And I appreciate sort of, it's one of those records that you listen to more, not as a whole piece of album, but you play like a couple songs and you move the needle on the record to the other songs you like. It's one of those albums.
Yeah, I agree. Sure. I agree. I mean, but I'm still shocked though by what Alan just said, because I love.
I mean, out of 25 albums, there is a lot of stuff that I like a lot more. Yeah. And it's not a bad album at all. I think it's a great album. I just like it less than most of his other stuff. Right. And individual songs The title song, Love Young Americans, is phenomenal. Fame, I'm just sick of. I just can't stand to hear it anymore.
It got marketed to death, right?
Yeah.
And this
Duran
record
Duran
is
had a
also
good
the
cover
point.
of it, though.
No, they didn't.
Yes,
No,
they
they
did.
did. Thank you.
No one agrees with me there, but you know.
Wow.
We love you, Stephanie.
I love you all.
Steph, you and I had this conversation in 1990, but Fame 1990, when it came out, was absolutely useless. And I think I remember telling you that once.
Yeah.
There are some cool moments in it. Some of the little remixy tricks that they do to it was okay, but
I am fascinated by the record for production value. I'm fascinated by it, by who's on it, and sort of just how it all got put together. The other reason why it's kind of important is it kind of gave like a mainstream stamp to that Philadelphia soul sound. I mean, Elton John's got Philadelphia Freedom, right? Which is kind of like the yin and yang of young Americans. Like Philadelphia is entering the consciousness of America as a music city right before the bicentennial. Kids, ask your parents.
All right, then I have the best transition from that for Philadelphia.
Okay.
Unless you want to keep going, and then I will make that transition.
No, go ahead.
Hall & Oates, the first album.
Yes.
I mean, sorry, the fourth album. I shouldn't say the fourth. But this one really pushed them into the top 40. I mean, they had Sarah Smile, Alone Too Long. I mean, this was just a huge album for them. And again, bringing into, and this is funny because Rob, speaking of the whole Bowie androgynous look, on this cover, if you remember the cover to this album, they're dressed in full makeup. They look like beautiful women. Well, one of them looks like a beautiful woman. The other one just looks like he's on drag. But Pierre LaRoche was responsible for this album cover, and he was also responsible for the Ziggy Stardust persona of Bowie. He like helped create that whole persona. So that album cover is really pretty hilarious with them all done up. But anyway, so yeah, that's my Philly transition.
Can I kind of transition onto that into something else that I want to talk about? Because there is kind of a flow from Young Americans to that to Siren by Roxy Music.
Oh yeah.
Which is seminal. I think it's safe to say that record is still seminal. I love it. I mean, you've got 2 hits from it, right? 2 big hits that are on it, but it's still a really great record on its own. And it is the first sort of Roxy Music record, I think, to really get mainstream play.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
I mean, Love is the Drug is kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Again, a record that has a lot of funk in it, right? And that's kind of like Ferry really digging his heels into black music. It is one of my favorite Roxy Music albums. It's hard. It's like Sparks. You can't really have just one Roxy Music record that you love.
And there's our Sparks mention for the week.
Well, Sparks did put out Indiscreet this year as well, but that's
they did.
Not one of my favorite Sparks albums by far.
Yeah. But I think, I think too that it's a really fascinating record because Roxy Music are sort of learning to do stuff with instruments that people don't know how to do. They are starting to do like production and they're kind of growing up. This is the record where they're really sort of like, I want to say it's like they're wood and they're whittling it down and making it smooth. That's kind of what they're doing with this record.
And particularly Love is the Drug. I mean, that was huge. And if you think about that mimed performance, and I forget which show it was on, where Brian Ferry is wearing that eye patch and that kind of pseudo-military garb, it's absolutely iconic and probably one of the enduring images of Brian Ferry in the 70s.
When's the first time you remember hearing it, Anthony?
Oh, I didn't really get into Roxy Music until probably my late 20s. So
yeah, me too.
I know, probably about 11, 12 years ago.
Yeah, I kind of discovered them sort of in my late to mid 20s. I'd heard like More Than This and Love is the Drug, but this is sort of the first album that was sort of like my jumping off point for the Roxy Music albums. Like, okay, I'm going to listen to their whole catalog, right?
Yeah.
And just the presentation of it is so fantastic. You've got Jerry Hall on the cover. You've got, this sort of opaque blue on it. And you just look at this thing and you're like, man, this is not going to sound like my garbage disposal running. This is going to be like an amazingly smooth record, right? This is just going to be I'm setting something up.
Okay.
But this is really smooth. This is really like a band like honing its pop chops, but not forgetting where they are, but also taking things around them. And I think this is probably the best example of Roxy Music taking the music world around them and incorporating it into what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I'm gonna
Steph,
switch it to super mainstream now.
Super
mainstream, almost. Some of it's sort of soft rock, but I think it's more like mainstream rock. Fleetwood Mac, their 10th album, but of course the first with Buckingham Nicks. And it reached number 1 on the Billboard Top 200. And actually it was in 1976, but it was after 58 weeks of being in the charts. I mean, that's bananas. This had like,
right.
So many hit songs on it. It had Over My Head. Oh, I love that song so much. Rhiannon, of course. Monday Morning, Landslide, Say You Love Me, Warm Ways. I mean, this was like chock full of amazing songs. And some of them were actually going to be on what was going to be a second Buckingham Nicks record, but it never got made, of course. So Rhiannon, I'm So Afraid, and Monday Morning were written and performed live by Buckingham and Nicks before they joined, but then they incorporated those songs into this album. But I mean, you really couldn't turn on the radio without hearing a Fleetwood Mac song in a set. They were pretty. This was a year that they really were just everywhere, I think.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember if I've told this story on our show before. I probably have once, but when Lindsay and Stevie first met the band, and Mick had invited Lindsay to join the band, and he's like, well, I've got this chick with me and we're a package deal, so you have to take us both. When they first came to the studio, Christine said, okay, I'll come over to my piano. I want to play you a thing that I'm working on. And the first song that she played them was Say You Love Me.
Wow.
And when she got to the chorus, Lindsay and Stevie just sort of jumped in on a 3-part harmony. And that's where Christine says she knew that this lineup was going to be something really special.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that story. That's cool.
Oh, good. Maybe I didn't tell it before.
No, I didn't. Well, you didn't tell me, but they really had just such a unique sound together. Their voices, their blend, so unique, so perfect. Oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Dragon Con in Atlanta is coming up in September, and I have pitched a whole bunch of panels this year, and one of the ones that I pitched is about this album, because I always try to get them to do some British music panel.
Mm-hmm.
And this year it's going to be the big turning year for Fleetwood Mac.
Cool.
And I hope it gets picked up, because I really want to talk for an hour about that album.
That'd be great.
I want to talk a little bit about Queen.
Queen had a big year that year.
I mean, you could say that. So in 1975, they dropped A Night at the Opera. Best known for its absolutely seminal hit, I'm in Love with My Car. But, I mean, let's not forget that Bohemian Rhapsody, which was on that album, was actually a double A-side with I'm in Love with My Car, which thus means I'm in Love with My Car is just as big as Bohemian Rhapsody ever was.
In sales, maybe. In airplay, definitely not.
I love I'm in Love with My Car.
I
think it's fucking fantastic.
Song. It's so good.
But that whole album is great. I mean, there are some, obviously Bohemian Rhapsody is the centerpiece of it, and it was re-released in 1991 after Freddie died, with a separate A-side, which was These Are the Days of Our Lives. But, everyone knows Bohemian Rhapsody. Everyone's headbanged to the guitar part at some point. We've all sung along to Galileo Magnifico. It's so classic. And it's no real surprise that once the radio stations took a chance on it, it blew up in the way that it did. But, as I said, I'm in love with my car. Huge. You're my best friend. Absolute classic.
Yeah.
And shout out to Love of My Life,
I'm going to also say 39 is one of my favorite Brian May songs. Amazing.
Just to go off on a little bit of a tangent, Brian May, I think, is one of the most underrated guitarists of all time. The level of influence he had and his versatility as a guitarist is just amazing. And so I would love to see him get more credit for all of the work he's done over the years.
Absolutely.
Speaking
I
of
agree.
Also, like singles that are so long, like Bohemian Rhapsody is like nearly 6 minutes long too. So you're right.
Yeah.
The radio stations did have to take a chance on it in that way as well. Which again,
That's
you
true.
just that would not happen today.
Well, since I kind of think of Queen, and particularly this period of Queen, Night of the Opera, Day at the Races, and that stuff as being prog adjacent, I'm just going to jump in with my prog report for this year for 1975. Thank you, Rob, for setting up my little thing. So there's a couple of, it's funny, this is a big year for prog, but there isn't a Genesis or a Yes album. And they're sort of the two biggies in the prog field. But Rush are having some early, not success, I won't say that, but Fly By Night comes out in February, which is really where they start to display some of the prog leanings that they have, because their first album was very Led Zeppelin influenced. And you start to see some of the more long form songwriting on their second album, Fly By Night. And then their third album comes out in September, Caress of Steel, which has definite, like a whole side-long suite. So you really start to see how prog is developing in their songwriting. Kansas, America's big answer to the prog scene, puts out 2 albums, Song for America, which is phenomenal, and Mask, which really flies under the radar, but I absolutely love it. I think it's one of the best albums they ever did. And then you've got Renaissance, who put out, I think, the best album they ever did, where they devote a whole side to doing this long suite, which is a retelling of the tale of Scheherazade. And it is amazing. So prog is just having a great year this year.
Well, and let's also not forget Pink Floyd putting out Wish You Were Here the same year. Effectively, it's only 5 tracks and clocks in at just over 44 minutes. And 2 of those tracks are the various parts of Shine On You Crazy Diamond. And then there's Wish You Were Here, which is, of course, a classic in its own right. And then 2 songs that no one really cares about in Welcome to the Machine and Have a Cigar.
What? Stop. Okay, hold on. Welcome to the Machine might be my favorite Pink Floyd song.
I mean, I'm jesting, Alan.
Okay.
Because I'm thinking, the hits, everyone knows Shine On You Crazy Diamond.
Yeah.
Everyone knows Wish You Were Here. It's only those of us who are actually fans and have listened to these albums in depth who are aware of those 2 tracks.
I was about to take you outside.
Oh, hey.
But also, Have a Cigar is a great song.
Yeah.
And it's got the quirkiness of having somebody who's not a band member doing lead vocals on it.
Yes. Overall, it's just a great album.
It is a fantastic album. And, the previous year, they hit their peak, theoretically, with Dark Side. But I think this is just as good, if not better, than Dark Side.
Yeah, I think so, too. I mean, I think most people would say the highlights of their career are Dark Side and The Wall, but I agree. This stands up with both of them, as 100%. Does much later the Division Bell.
Oh, Division Bell's fantastic. Yeah.
I do want to just defend Genesis a little bit because they're going through this lead singer transition. And to make up for their lack of output in 75, they do put out 2 albums in 76.
That's true.
One of which was technically recorded in 75 with A Trick of the Tail.
That is absolutely true.
All right.
Technicalities.
Right.
Pivoting off of... Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Everybody wants to go.
I'm going to just mention 2 albums in the kind of hard rock vein, really kind of just briefly, because we always talk about Heart, but we love Heart. So this was their debut album, Dreamboat Annie. And although there wasn't only hard rockin' songs on it, there was definitely like Crazy on You, which is kick ass, Magic Man. But what I actually personally love the most on this album are the different versions of Dreamboat Annie, because there's like there's the 3 versions with the reprise at the end. I love it so much. Anyway, so this album blasts them into the public, and they're sort of, taking off from there. And then another album by Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic, which was their third album. This just, again, talking about blasting into superstardom with, Sweet Emotion, Walk This Way, and there's the title song, Toys in the Attic, which I love. Just such a great song.
Too.
God.
Me too. So, you would expect me to be talking about the Heart album, but since this year is their 50th anniversary, I kind of thought later this year I want to do a whole
Heart
show devoted to a retrospective on Heart. So I'll save everything I have for that show.
Yeah. And that's why, I know we've mentioned this before, the whole story with Portrait and Mushroom Records and whatever. So we'll discuss in depth,
Yeah. And so Rob and Anthony, you can be on that show with us if you want.
Yeah. I'll think about it.
Yeah.
Good.
We'll trade you your Heart show for a Spark show.
Done.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about Heart and you guys can talk about Spark.
Great. 2 very short episodes.
Yeah.
So there's no short Sparks episodes. For people that had 2 albums, and also this circles back to kind of what Anthony mentioned, because Phil Collins actually plays on one of them. Brian Eno released 2 records this year, right? Phil Collins is on Another Green World. So is John Cale, which is the one we're talking about. But he also did discrete music this year, which is ambient. And that sort of set the tail for some of the ambient stuff that's coming down the road later. Now, what's interesting about Another Green World is that it's just kind of like Eno's trying to figure out what he's going to do. He's like, I have to make a record. I don't know what I'm going to do. So he's lying on the floor, basically listening to like rainfall and classical music and trying to process it in his head. And he comes out with Another Green World. That is sort of the origin story of that record. And it's just kind of, you hear a guy who's striving to be so perfect that he can't make a record. He can't really just go into a studio and do anything. He's taken forever to do it. And, I think you really see some interesting stuff on his third record. And I think, Fripp's on it too, as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. So I think that's sort of an interesting time for Brian Eno as well. And those 2 records are also good. It also segues into, you talked about an album about an artist being 50 years old. You've talked about stuff that, over time people love. A record that I cannot understand 50 years later is still Lou Reed's Metal Machine music.
Right.
We have to at least talk about this because it was sort of like his label's looking for a big hit record. America's ready for a new hit Lou Reed record. He's kind of got this unpredictable thing. A lot of his contemporaries are doing these really amazing things that are, switching gears and stuff. He makes pretty much unlistenable sort of like atmospheric, my trash can is getting driven down the street and run over by 4 semis and a gorilla, right? Sort of record. And it had a huge influence on industrial music later, right? And it has an influence on sort of like avant-garde music. But we talk about all this stuff in 1975. People will say, I can't listen to this or I can't listen to that. I love me some Lou Reed. I know people have defended it, but I just don't get it. I'm just like, I know what you're trying to do, man, but it's just like, what is this? It is just, noise. And you'd think that after he does this, he's like, okay, I get it. No, he makes Lulu later. It's just like, So that is my frustration with Lou Reed in 1975, even though I was only 7.
Lulu's better than you realize.
Yes, it is.
Well, only because Metallica's on
it. True. I'm also trolling a little bit.
No.
Surely not.
Right. All right. So I want to talk about, I got 2 things, my 2 like big things on my list. One is Wings put out Venus and Mars in 75. And the previous album, Band on the Run, was a great album, but it was basically Paul, Linda, and Denny Lane were sort of the nucleus, and they had a bunch of like hired up musicians around them. And Paul really wanted Wings to be a band again, and he really wanted to go out and tour again. So he puts together a new rhythm section, and it kind of becomes the classic Wings lineup with Jimmy McCulloch on lead guitar and Joey English on drums. And Venus and Mars is just a killer album with Rock Show, You Gave Me the Answer, Magneto, and Titanium Man, which every Marvel Comics fan loves that song. And the single off of it was Listen to What the Man Said, which a year or so later, they put out that big 3-record live album from the following year's tour. And all these songs are just made to be played live, and they all sound so much better on the live album than they do here. The production on this album is kind of weird, but the songs are there. And you really see it when that live album comes out, and things like Rock Show and Magneto just take on a whole new life and just sound big and powerful and exciting. Mm-hmm. And then the other one, this is somebody that I've never been a big fan of. And I'm kind of surprised that when I'm going through my list of 75s, this was like on my, I have to talk about this. And that is Born to Run by Springsteen, because that is a phenomenal album.
Also,
I mean, it has got not just the title song, which I think is probably the best Springsteen song there is, because it is just one of those adrenaline songs that just gets you going. But also, in addition to that, it's got 10th Avenue Freeze Out, Night, Thunder Road, Jungle Land is just amazing. That whole record is just incredible.
Yeah.
And this is really where Springsteen starts to become the boss. And man, it is just incredible.
And it is an album that anyone can listen to. It's very blue collar. Yeah. It's very rooted in blues and you know, a little bit of soul stuff, but like every record, it's one of those records where like literally every song is like, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. All right. So we're coming up top of the hour. Y'all got some other things that you want to throw in that we hadn't had a chance to talk about yet, but we want to get in?
I'll honorable mention too. Yeah. James Taylor's album Gorilla, which has How Sweet It Is in Mexico. Oh, I mean, that's just, it sort of reminds me of camp, because we used to sing these songs, you know, and play these records when we were there when we were little. So it was really nice. Just good memories. Also Paul Simon's 50 Ways. I mean, still crazy after all these years, but has 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Still crazy after all these years, of course. What else? Gone at Last is on this. My Little Town. I don't know. There's so many great tunes on this. And of course, this is also My Little Town was the first time that he and Art Garfunkel had recorded together in like 5 years. Phoebe Snow is duetting with him on Gone at Last. So cool album.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give us the Krautrock report. I'm going to jump into new 75. There wouldn't be bands like Stereolab or Electrolane if this record did not come out. It's sort of like, while America's doing all this stuff, Germany and Eastern Europe is making these just like records now that people are scratching their heads about. But boy, in 4 or 5 years, people are going to go, man, right? This is one of the reasons Bowie moved to Berlin. This is sort of like a fantastically great, complete record. It came out in February, and it's the third album from New, or Neu, however you want to pronounce it.
Neu,
yeah. I've heard both. I was calling it Neu up until this week when I was in a Cleveland record store, and then somebody said, "No, it's New."
It is not new. It is Neu.
Yeah. You know, but I say, well, if it's Neubauten, then it's Neu, and whatever. Anyway, so that record is fantastic. If you start with an album from them, start with that, and then also completely switching gears. Wayne Shorter, who's one of my favorite jazz musicians, made a record with Milton Nascimento, who's like a Brazilian artist this year, and it's like it's literally the perfect sort of circle back to everything Alan mentioned in the introduction. It's jazzy, it's kind of rocky, it's got funk on it. You got Herbie Hancock on this record. It's Brazilian. It's sort of like, you know, you've got Beauty and the Beast and you've got Tarde, these two fantastic songs, but it's sort of like the jazz take on funk and rhythm. And it's like, it really, jazz sort of needed something to shake it and go, make some jazz that people can sort of like bop their head to and not scratch their head to. And this is it.
Rob, you missed something.
Okay.
You did your krautrock report, but you didn't mention Kraftwerk.
Well, here's the thing with Kraftwerk, is I thought we were running low on time. So yeah, Autobahn comes out in late 74, right? And Autobahn is 50 years old. Kraftwerk's touring. I think they just played Atlanta, where you are.
Yeah, they did.
Alan. Yeah. This record is huge as well. There wouldn't be things like Chemical Brothers or Underworld or even Radiohead, Blur, without Autobahn. All these musicians now that have nothing to do with each other musically love Kraftwerk. And you hear this sound coming out of this thing. It is long. I mean, you talk about a 6-minute song. Autobahn is like, almost a whole album sign, right?
Yes.
It's very minimal, but it's also very catchy. Like it's very hard to describe, other than it's sort of like, you hear this is like, this is kind of the sound of the future, but we don't know what future it is. And the production's fantastic. It still sounds fresh. The way they made it was really good. So there you go.
Cool. So the only ones really left that I've got, Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare, which is a phenomenal record. The Rocky Horror Picture Show soundtrack, of course, came out that year.
So great.
Patti Smith with Horses.
Oh, yeah.
Killer album. Jefferson Starship, Red Octopus, which is I'm not as big a fan of that middle, I call it the middle period, where they aren't Jefferson Airplane anymore, but they haven't quite got to the chapter of Jefferson Starship that I love. But there's some great songs on there. Journey's first album comes out, which is interesting, and Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good year.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to take a very quick break, but we got a little bit more to do once we come around after the ads. So stick around.
All right, monkeying around, start talking.
Mr. Bobolina, Mr. Bob Bobolina,
calling
Mr.
Alameda.
Bobolina.
About your podcast.
We talk about an Emmy-winning comedy series.
We talk about a band who outsold the Beatles and the Stones in 1967.
Still sticking to that story, huh? Well, if you know what's good for you, you'll change your tune.
We talk about a groundbreaking multimedia project
That inspired generations of artists and fans.
All right, throw the book at them.
This book is overdue.
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
All right, we're back and we're going to be doing our picks of the week. Anthony, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so there is a lot of really exciting music coming out right now. I want to give a very special shout out to the new Arch Enemy album, which dropped a couple of days ago. And I don't know how they keep doing it, but every album they've been doing since Alyssa joined the band is just getting better and better and better. And this new one, Blood Dynasty, is just fucking phenomenal. It's brutal and melodic at the same time. It really is that kind of blend of styles that you expect of them. And it's good. It's really good. Additionally, Bloodywood dropped their second album, and I loves me some Bloodywood. A little bit of Indian folk music mixed with new metal. There is an album on there about how good Mom's cooking is, which is just the best idea for a rap metal track of all time. People are like, oh my god, metal's so satanic, and Bloodywood like, yeah, here's a song about Mom's cooking. Right? Amazing. And of course, I think the highlight of that album for me is the collaboration they do with Baby Metal called Bake Off, which means fearless in Hindi. It's awesome. Those are the two big things. There have been a couple of new tracks that have hit from Marina, and unfortunately she seems to be following her pattern for me, where the even numbered albums I don't tend to enjoy, and the odd ones are fantastic. And unfortunately this is album number 6 for her, and her first 2 singles that she's released have not impressed me. So almost like a reverse pick of the week there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's unusual to hear me say things about Marina that are negative, but this just isn't grabbing me. So those are my 2 picks of the week and my sort of anti-pick of the week.
Maybe it's a grower, not a shower.
Maybe.
Rob, what you got?
Well, okay, so I'm going to jump right into New Chinese Bear from China via Seattle. And they had an album late last year called Wah. They are just catchy as all get up, and they're perky and fun. They're kind of like an electronic, like if Saint Etienne made a record with the Linda Lindas, this is what it would sound like. It's really great. Also, another band called Oracle Sisters. They're based in Paris. They have a second record out right now, which is called Divinations. It's also, really kind of funky. So I'm going to recommend that. And then keeping on the theme of Paris, two of our friends, Evan and his fantastic partner from Sleepy Kitty, have a band now they are in called the Open Flames. They have a record out called Same Time Next Year. And it's a full-on band. It's not just those two now.
Not just Paige and Evan?
It's not just Paige and Evan. It's Paige and Evan. Dan Friedman is on it. It's sort of like an REM record with Sleepy Kitty on it.
Oh, wow.
That's kind of the easiest way to describe it. It's pretty fantastic. Blackest, which is the new single from the Ravenettes. I love the Ravenettes. They sort of do this like couple really things really, really, really well that I dig a lot. And then also there's a shoegaze band from St. Louis called Seashine that have finally released their first album. And the very first single from it has like probably the best drumming on a shoegaze record I've heard in a very long time. And it actually lets the drummer drown out the guitars, which thank God.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I could go on forever, but I won't.
Okay. Well, I have discovered a new show and I am obsessed.
Oh.
I've been doing a lot of Paramount Plus lately because they released a whole slew of those old MTV and VH1 shows, Crossroads and Behind the Music and Storytellers and all those things. And I've been watching a lot of that. But I have discovered something new because they showed a trailer in between one of those episodes. And it's a show which originally came out its first season 2 years ago. And they just dropped season 2 a couple of days ago. And that is called Family Legacy. And it talks about a bunch of different pop stars through their kids. They interview the kids about growing up with these iconic figures as their parents. And it is one of the most wholesome things I have ever seen. It is so great that you get stuff from pop, rock, rap, and it's just the way that these kids grew up. Some of them grew up on tour, like Sammy Hagar's kid grew up on tour with Van Halen. And he talks about that. And since it's an MTV production, they kind of show the kids these iconic MTV moments with their parents and get them to react to them.
That sounds
great. It is really great. It is so good. The first episode, though, features Draven Bennington, who, of course, is Chester's son. And he's such a sweet kid, and he's so proud of his dad. But then they have to address the fact that Chester is not around anymore. And it is just heartbreaking.
Oh, wow.
But this show, I watched the first season, which is only 5 episodes. There's, I think, 8 or 10 in season 2. And I'll start on that later, but I loved every episode. And the second episode is kids of one of the Backstreet Boys and one of the NSYNC guys. And it was so good. Like, I didn't think I would have any interest in it, but it was so good.
Sounds great.
I highly recommend that. Paramount Plus, Family Legacy. Okay, so next week, the show is all Stephanie.
Yes.
Stephanie, what do we have planned next time?
We have our friend Olivia Serafini Solli coming back to be with us to talk about her new documentary that just got released on Apple TV and Amazon and like all the streaming platforms. It's called Endless Calls for Fame, the story of the new rising suns. And we will talk all about the movie and how Olivia, got picked up got the film picked up by Gravitas. And it's going to be a great conversation.
You know, what's interesting is that we talked to her a year ago when the film was almost done and she was starting to shop it around to different distributors. And that episode did well. You know, a lot of people listened to it. But now that we've been talking a lot about the film coming out, and I think that just, she has been promoting the film dropping on the streaming platforms also. That episode from a year ago has been picking up new viewers,
so cool.
New listeners.
That's great.
And like every day there for like 3 weeks, it was getting new hits. And I was so excited. People we're listening to it and finding out about her and about the film. And we're going to get an update on that film because it went through some changes before it's met its final form. And we've had some big press releases and all kinds of things. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about with her.
Yes.
I'm so excited to have her back.
I know, me too. Yes, and if anyone should, you can watch the film and then listen along to our discussion. So you can know about the movie, and it's a fabulous trip down, the '90s music scene memory lane kind of thing, and it's just a great story, told very well.
And I will say, I haven't watched the final version of it that's on streaming.
Yep.
But I'm going to maybe tonight. But when we watched it in its almost finished, I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
I loved it so much. And I can't wait to see
You're going to dig the little tweaks. Yeah. You're going to love the little tweaks. Yeah.
I can't wait. So we will see everybody next week in 2 weeks for that. Until then, Anthony, where can people hear more of you?
Well, as usual, you can also hear me on the Watchers in the Fourth Dimension podcast, where we are watching our way through all of Doctor Who from 1963 until now. We have just wrapped up the Tom Baker era. So our most recent episode was on the show's first, a rather disappointing attempt at a spin-off, K9 and Company. And shortly we'll be moving into the Fifth Doctor or Peter Davison era. So as usual, you can find that wherever you like to get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, etc., and including probably wherever you're listening to this one. So you can find us there. And if you want to follow us on the socials, we are on Facebook and Instagram these days. We've kind of dropped the Twitter thing, given Elon. But we're there at Watchers4D.
All right, Stephanie.
You can find me on Facebook under Stephanie Seymour Music. You can find me on Instagram under... Can I just not talk tonight? Oh, no.
You should have this part so well rehearsed.
Just copy and paste. All of a sudden I got the giggles. Oh, no. You can find me on Instagram at _.
Let me help you out. there_r_birds.
I have a website called therearebirds.com. I'm really tired. And you can find me on Bandcamp and Spotify and stuff. Good night.
Wow.
Good job,
All
Steph.
Right. All right, Robbie.
That's so hard to follow. You can find me on Louder Than War Radio on Mondays. 12 to 2. Yeah, 12 to 2 Central for Antics on Louder Than War Radio. You can listen to that. All the shows are archived. All 99 editions of it are archived on Mixcloud through louderthanwarradio.com. Also, you can listen to on Mondays on the Face Radio. I have a show there called The Free Design. It's on 5 to 7 Central, 6 to 8 Eastern. And now every week, but there's 2 shows a month because, I'm busy. On Eardrum Buzz Radio out of LA, I'm doing 2 shows a month. Each one repeats twice a day. Saturdays, 8 to 10 a.m. and Saturdays, 8 to 10 p.m. So the poor fire-ravaged people of Los Angeles can listen to me as they slum out into the streets on a Saturday night trying to find something to do. But that show is called The Comforts of Madness, and you can hear that there. Those shows are also archived as well.
Okay. You can find me at cosmiccreative.com, KOZMIC creative.com. While you're there, you can see the teaser trailer for this documentary that I've been working on for a while now. Our full big first trailer is going to be out in a week. We're going to debut it on Saturday afternoon at an event that's here in Atlanta, and then we'll have it out on our socials and YouTubes and stuff right after that. So check out that trailer because I'm pretty excited about it. And now that we have our 2 trailers done, I've still got a little bit of interviewing to do, and then we start editing on the film.
Oh my gosh. That's so exciting.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Talk more about this on this podcast.
Well, it's not music related, so
Well, still
okay.
a little bit more.
I'll start that next week. All right. Everybody have a great next couple of weeks. We'll see you in 2 weeks when we talk about the documentary that Stephanie appears in. You can see Stephanie's lovely face on all streaming platforms when you go watch Olivia's film. And we will see you again then. Everybody have a great week and keep rocking on.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping for the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.